Hi friends, WizD here. Welcome to a new Raid Shadow Legends video. Today I want to talk to you about a different topic a little bit. It's about Raid's future and the game that Hell Hades Fateless is developing as a counter, well, not a counter, but as a competitor, let's say, to Raid. Across the years, we've seen multiple games that rose and fell that try to compete with Raid in exactly the same genre. But the new thing here is that the biggest content creator for Raid, Hell Hades, and his team, who are all very talented players and content creators who got a lot of experience of what the community wants from this kind of game, they are all participating and joining their efforts and their heads into creating that new game that can be big on the scene. A few days ago, as you're seeing behind me, I posted on the channel a poll about whether you think that Hell Hades or Fateless game, are you excited for this game release or not? My actual question was, do you think it's going to be a strong competitor to Raid or not? As you can see behind me, I got 100 votes, not bad for my channel size. 50, let's say closer to 60% of those who participated chose that yes, these guys know what they are doing, so they are excited, they are looking forward to playing this game. 35% more or less said that it might be good, but it won't compete with Raid, and 5% they just didn't know what I'm talking about. They don't know, they are not embedded into the Raid community and the gaming community like the other guys, so they didn't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, the majority of the players are excited for the game and they are waiting for it. What I want to talk about in this video are a few points that are sort of like an advice, direction advice from my point of view for both companies. So for Plarium and for Fateless, some of the points will be only relevant to Fateless, probably because Plarium already have an established game that they are managing for quite a few years now, managing successfully, I would say. So let's talk about these points and let me know in the comments below whether you agree or disagree with me. I'll try to keep also the timestamps on the video as well. The first important point for a game, which is already established in Raid, but Fateless are also not doing a bad job for it. And while we're comparing a few of these points, I'll have to mention the most recent two Raid competitors on the scene now, which is Watcher of Realms and Dragonair. These are the two games that were released in the past year, and they are doing a good job of carving themselves a small space next to Raid. Whether this will continue over the next year or two, or whether they will fall behind like the previous competitors, that's what we'll have to see, but I'll mention them here and there and show you some stuff from them as well. So first point, back to the first point there, we're talking about just generally champ design, graphics and champion design in the game. And as we can see, Raid is excelling in this area, but Fateless is also bringing some very good quality of graphics that we've seen in their videos. But let me compare it to something else that we're seeing on the scene now, because I want to relate to it in a specific way. What we're seeing on the screen behind me is Watcher of Realms, one of the contenders that were launched in the past year. And let me show you here. Can we find the gallery? If we go to the gallery to compare the level of graphics here, and just for example, because this is one of my favorite designs in the game, you see here Valkyrie basically, what they introduced more, not only a graphics quality level that's as high as Raid, but also cinematics for some of the champs. Not all of them, but crazy cinematics for some of them. Let me get myself off the screen here. Then maybe, yeah, I think we have the output here. So this is cinematic for a legendary champion in the game, Valkyrie, and you have quite a few of these in the game. Very high quality. You can play them whenever you want. So it brings a higher level of graphics and quality into that whole mobile gaming RPG hero collector scene. Why is that important specifically for newer games? So now I'm addressing Fateless and their game here, because I would say that what Watcher of Realms, and I can also show you some things from Dragonair, but not relevant right now, they over invested in graphics. Do they need to do this? Do they need those cinematics for every champion? Most probably not. It's not an overkill though, because look at the details. Look at the cinematic here. Okay, let's bring myself back now that this is over, and let's go back to raid as well. Yeah, so what I was saying, why they needed to do this, because they needed that O factor in the beginning. This is not mostly for the veteran players who will test the game and see how good it is, as long as the graphic level is good enough, but new players who are just clicking on the game from the Play Store. If they don't have that O factor to grasp the attention of more players than whoever is playing Raid for the first time during this time, probably they won't have a good chance, an even chance to compete. Raid had a lot of time to develop such a variety of champions, over 700, 800 now, while you're launching your game with 150, 200 champions. So you need that O factor. You need to over invest in the beginning to grab the attention of the newer players on the scene here. So graphics was the first point. I think that both sides will do an okay job, a good job regarding this specific point. So let's move on to the next one. It was just a point that we had to talk about, because if you like what you see, you'll play the game. Otherwise, like a lot of the games that had decent gameplay but got that cartoonish low level quality, dropped over time because you don't want to look at the game for that long anymore. So graphics of the board now. Second point, which is a huge area of improvement that Raid can do, while newer games on the theme like Watcher of Realms or Dragonair are doing an amazing job in killing it and beating Raid in that specific area, which is quality of life and time spent in game. What do I mean by this? Players don't hate spending time in game if they have the choice to spend it. By choice, I can spend a few hours building a team for a new dungeon or a higher dungeon level, or speed tuning a clan boss team, for example, or something like this. This is my choice. I enjoy the challenge and I enjoy the achievement of beating that challenge. But what I don't like is the farming time. I've already achieved what I wanted to achieve. I did the speed tune. I've beaten clan boss with the same team 100 times. Very recently, Raid gave us quick battles, and a lot of the other games are giving us AFK or away from the keyboard farming for the dungeons. I don't need to leave the game open and running to do 50 Fire Nights runs or 100 or whatever. Just let that be away from keyboard, let that be in the background while I'm doing other stuff in the game. You don't want to make it immediate finish, I understand this, because otherwise we are widening the gap between Krakens and regular players, even paid players, but regular players, because if a Kraken can do 1,000 Fire Knight runs immediately, that means that the gear gap will be it will break the game. It will literally break the game. So keep the time limit here. I'm farming a specific dungeon in, let's say, a minute. So doing 100 rounds will take 100 minutes, but let me do it while the game is closed or in the background while I'm doing arena or other stuff in the game. Maybe I cannot run another dungeon at the same time, but allow me to do this in the background. Without that huge time, quality of life element that Raid is currently lacking, I would say that this is the things that I get most negative comments on from players. Like even when I asked people about the Fateless game, the first comment that came there is that if it's taking as much time, I won't even try it. A lot of people got into Raid specifically because of that whole COVID situation that won't happen again. We were all locked at home. We don't have anything better to do. We were spending some entertainment money on the game that we would have spent like going to somewhere else outside that we couldn't be at that time. But that time is gone now. We have way less time, especially with the age category of players playing this game. We don't have the same amount of time to spend in game. So the majority of the players now will need to decrease the time spent in game And there are solutions for this that other games are implementing. And unless Fateless and Plarium ups their game considerably in this area, it will be their downfall. It will be their weak point. Yes, I understand Raid is already in profit mode, but they have quite a few good years ahead of them of just like still gaining profit. I don't think that they want to just shorten this period just by ignoring that time factor. On the other hand, my advice for Fateless would be, if you manage to do this, that background farming, that away from keyboard or whatever while the game is closed, if you can embed this from day one into the game, you just gained a huge advantage over Raid, though not over like Dragonair and Watcher of Realms, who do have some kind of that. So yeah, that would be the second major point. Timing game and farming, and how the game is handling it. Third area or topic to talk about is time gating or gating specific areas of content. In Raid, for example, we don't see that gating by time, but we see it by specific champ. You might be like stuck in Spider, for example, if you don't have Cold Heart. Yes, you can build an Armiger, but yeah, you get the idea that I mean. For specific areas of content, like right now, Fire Knight Hard without a Newt is very difficult. Or without, like, let's say there are 5 champions in the game that can do this to a good degree. Let's say that without the ally attackers and some of the very few freeze plus utility or damage champions, Fire Knight Hard is almost impossible. With exception of probably Razelvarg and Zenogre. But yeah, main point is that you're gating content either based on something that you cannot achieve unless you pull it from a shard, or time gating, which is the preferred method, and that play games like Dragonair is doing that, for example. So you cannot pass certain content till you're 1 week or 2 weeks into the game. That means that I'm guaranteeing that this player will be playing over a period of time, and I'm limiting the time they spend in game, which is not a bad thing. That goes back to the second point, which is time in game. So how do you gate content? And being sensitive and being like able to react fast, which was one of the weak points for Raid. Raid developers are very slow to respond to bugs, nerfs, buffs, and all of that stuff. I won't even mention this as a point, but yeah, all of us know this. While games who can respond faster to such things, like I'll use the Raid example here. If Fateless released their game and find out like 3 or 4 weeks down the line that the majority of players are stuck in certain areas because they don't have a certain champ or hero or whatever they will call it, they should immediately release either more champions doing the same, or let's say give the community a fusion that can do the same. Epic Fusion or whatever is the equivalent, so that it's accessible for the majority of players as long as they are active, and we've just beaten that gate that we didn't anticipate into the game. So gating content, whether it's time-based or how many champs you have maxed out, any sort of that gating that will require some farming and building to elongate the life of the game is definitely required. Otherwise, everyone will beat the game in day one and will be done with it. But it needs to be done in a smart way so people are not fed up or extremely bored. Like, for example, in our early game account that we started, and I didn't get lucky with any crazy pulls there from voids and everything. Now, all I'm doing all day is building one champ after the other, and almost not making any progress in game, in clan boss or dungeons or whatever, till I have those 5, or now I'm getting into another couple of champs that I need, the Cleanser and Armiger, to beat higher content there. Spoiler for the next video in this series. But the main thing here is that if I have 4 weeks of just farming and building champs without anything exciting in game, that can make some players leave. It will make some players leave, because 4 weeks of just boring farming. So what I'm trying to say here, if you do those time or number of champions maxed or whatever, if you do this kind of gating, you have to do it in a very smart way while keeping the players entertained in a certain way while they're doing that farming and building, with daily events, with whatever side quests like what Dragonair is doing, something like this. keep them entertained while they're building the champs and doing the gated stuff. So that's my, is it third point now? Yeah. I'll talk about like two areas at the same time, which is the free-to-play player base, which is in most games like more than half of the player base. And the other side of that is like the length of the break-even period. What I mean by that, and raid of course won't be a factor here because the game already probably broke even. They're just making profit in this phase. But for Fateless, like let's say that, and of course this is a business, they need to like earn back the money that they're spending right now on developing the game. But if the break-even period, I'm just giving an example here, is 2 years after the game launches, if they can elongate this to a third year, so their monetization strategy won't be as aggressive in the beginning, that will help the bigger community like stay longer with the game. Because the main thing here is that one of the factors that Raid built over the years is those habits. Like us old timers, we know that we're building that habit of logging into the game every day, doing our dailies, doing fusions. Some people get bored out of that cycle and just leave the game. That's understandable. But again, those habits need to be built. You need to build the loyalty basically. And because the majority of the players, more than half of them, are going to be free to play, you need to find the mechanic there to keep your free-to-play community engaged, entertained, active, and progressing. Because happy, loyal customers, well, your customers are all players, not only the paid ones, by the way. Happy, loyal customers are what gives that business the revenue over a longer period of time. Though the paid players are the ones who are funding the game, who are paying you back the money that you spent on the game, but the majority of the player base, including the free-to-play ones, are the ones that are creating your statistics in Arena, in clans, in how many downloads you get from the Play Store, in the reviews and all of that, YouTube videos, like posts on Reddit and all of that stuff. That active community talking about the game and enlarging that community over time won't happen if you're only catering for a small percentage of them. So keep this in mind. Like monetization strategies, how aggressive they are. What I'm seeing is that in the other games, it's way less aggressive than Raid. Raid is built how it's built. That's done now. I don't think they are changing this. This is my advice for newer games. From the Raid side, the advice would be, which is they sort of do, whenever a new game comes to the scene and grabs the attention of players, they'll have to give us more like freebies and events to engage the players. Otherwise they will all leave to the next thing, because if I'm opening like those 30 secrets that I have saved right now and I don't get anything good on my in-game account, that's very disappointing. So give me a fusion, give me another Newt or Emic or whatever for the summer event. Just keep the player base engaged. Next topic to talk about is how RNG works inside this game. We're all into this game because of the history of like Dungeons and Dragons and cards collection and all of the things that we used to do when we were way younger. Part of the excitement there is opening that pack of cards and not knowing whether I'm getting a common card that I got 100 times before or that golden very rare one. It's exactly the same here, so you don't want to eliminate this factor. But the RNG in like the summons or the shard pulling is one thing. The RNG in other areas can be decreased. Like the other games, especially like Dragonair, I gotten into it a little bit recently. The RNG is working with an actual dice roll, like Dungeons and Dragons dice roll in Dragonair, for example. I'm getting back to playing it a little bit. Maybe I release a video, I have some summons to do there. But the main thing here is that make sure that the RNG will give the players the excitement, whether it's in Arena, whether it's in shard pools or crystal pools or whatever. But don't make it to a level that 75% of the time it will cause frustration, not only that excitement. You want to have the positive side, you want to have the disappointment, keep them balanced, and just, of course, that whole gambling mentality with like Raid and the company owning it, that's a different aspect there. But basically, if we're talking about a new game, you need to do this way less if you want to have a successful game in this area. That's my opinion, at least. Next point that I wanted to bring up, especially that staff being part of the Fateless team, scares me a little bit, which is a complexity check. players like a certain level of complexity in building champs. Like, yes, I like part of the challenge, part of me thinking about what gear sets I want to put on whatever champion I'm building, what skills, like whether I'm investing books or not in them, what masteries I'm giving them, which team synergy, buffers, the buffer, speed boosters, and all of that stuff. So that level of complexity, there's a certain challenging in a good way level that will keep the players engaged, thinking, creating sheets, sharing content, sharing builds, and all of that stuff. And sometimes that complexity, what I've seen from other games sometimes, is too high that it's driving players to just leave the game. If I think about it, if I watch a few guides, if I spend hours and days trying to figure out how to build a specific champion to beat a certain area of content, and I cannot figure it out, and bear in mind I'm talking about the average player here, if they cannot figure it out, the game is too complex and they won't like it. If it's too easy, then people will get bored of it fast. So there's a balance there that the game needs to keep. I think that Raid got the perfect level of complexity of keeping the players engaged, checking and building and failing sometimes, and then revisiting the whole build and all of that. Anything more than this probably is too complex, but coming to a point that I touched on a little bit with the time factor here, other games got like something that Raid just started very recently to do, which I think is really a bad thing here. Like, we're talking about presets and such stuff. That existed in other games. Swapping gear without cost exists in other games, and all of that stuff. Not spending hours. Why am I even keeping this piece? Not spending hours watching gear rolls exists in other games. So, quality of life, basically. Respect the time of your players. I don't even want this piece. Anyway, I think I made my point. Respecting the time of your players and adding quality of life, like quality of life features are a major thing in the game, because it's a game. You are selling a luxury product. Players don't have to, like, it's not like a car that I'll get to work in. If I don't like the game, if it's not respecting my time and effort, then I'm just leaving it. So quality of life should be a priority in all aspects. Respecting time, respecting like that I can save gear, go back, save teams, go back to them, and all of that stuff. Raid sprinkle this in a much slower rate than they should of a game of their size. So focusing on quality of life will be a major factor for both Fateless and for Raid Future. So that's the advice for both of them in this area. And one last point, this will be only to Fateless. One of the great things that Watcher of Realms and Dragonair did successfully is that they didn't do the mistake of the previous competitors. They didn't compete with Raid in their own like turf there. So having arena, dungeons, faction wars, like several dungeons for gear and accessories and stuff, and then dungeons for potions or scrolls or whatever, that kind of game, Raid already topped it, they perfected it. If you're getting in with the same content, probably you won't win there. What Watcher of Realm and Dragonair did is that they did something different. They differentiated themselves by different gameplay, open world and side quests in the case of Dragonair, while maintaining the hero collector part with the Dungeons and Dragons collab and all of that. While in case of Watcher of Realms, they built their game around the tower defense mode, which is not in Raid. But yeah, they were very successful in having that tower defense grid system, which the grid system also exists in Dragonair. Basically, they differentiated themselves. And that's maybe what Hill Hades talked about to Simon in the last video, what they wanted to do with the grid system and then them rebuilding it or stepping back to do it differently. If they don't differentiate themselves in the gameplay and do it exactly like what Raid is doing, that's what all the failed competitors did. You have to differentiate yourself. That was my last advice to Fateless. I'm wishing both games to be successful. I hope we'll enjoy both games for years to come, and you will enjoy my content for years to come. Thank you for tuning in today. I'll see you next time. Bye.